The time has arrived for Oklahoma State, Kansas State, what is always a love-hate relationship. It's a game that everybody circles because it's fun to be at, but it's also extremely frustrating because these games are always way too close for comfort. But you know what? We have a guest today, so you don't have to hear my face this entire time.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at All Day State. Today, we're partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more. Right now, you can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 back in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Meanwhile, we get shifted into the conversation of, obviously, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. But we're going to have somebody help me out here today because he might know a thing or two about Kansas State, being a Kansas State student, rolling it right into a over-decade career in Kansas State athletics media. He was the big wig, the boss hog for quite some time before he decided to go out on his own and partially take over the YouTube world. I have been watching his shows for a little over 2.5 years now, so he doesn't know this, but this has been a little while in the making for me. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me bring on to the show today KState legend, John Kurtz. How are we feeling, sir?
Hey, I'm feeling great, man. I appreciate that. That was a heck of an intro. I need you every time I come somewhere.
Dude, it's a good thing I didn't know your height and weight. I mean, I thought about rolling into the 5 foot something, some kind of weight. You know what I mean? I was about to bring it home with that right there. But nonetheless, man, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. You know, your ascension up through the media game, I think, is something that everybody kind of needs to pay attention to because you kind of blazed your own trail after going the traditional path. So I appreciate your time. As it pertains to the Kansas State Wildcats, or as I like to call them, the Purple Power Cats of Manhattan and Kansas, whenever you look at this game specifically, both teams coming off of a heartbreaking loss, right? Oklahoma State we had the ball for 17 minutes and 40 seconds offensively, and about 15 minutes of it was kind of offensive to watch. But we made it kind of fun in the end. As it went for y'all in Provo, Utah, it was a wild environment. It was a raucous crowd. And who thought Big 12 late at night was going to end up being a thing? But it's looked like a difficult proposition.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, K-State made it pretty easy for people to duck out and go to bed early with that 6-minute stretch that they played there. I mean, that was about as brutal as it gets. I mean, it was crazy. You know, I mean, K-State's in control 6-0 with like just over 2 minutes left in the half, and it completely came unglued. Now, part of the problem there is just not punching in touchdowns early. They got in the red zone twice. They were moving the ball. The defense was shutting down BYU. I mean, it felt like everything was going according to plan for the most part, but they had issues with red zone penalties throughout the game, and that crept up early. Both of the first 2 trips in the red zone, they have a penalty. It's a killer. Avery Johnson kind of bailed on a pocket too early when there was about to be a wide open tight end in the end zone. And I think that was a huge kind of turning point in the game. If you want to look at, how K-State can win a game that they wound up losing 38-9, because if you go up 10-0, 14-0, one, you're going to put BYU in a spot where Jake Retzloff, their quarterback, who's very turnover prone, probably has to try and put the ball in the air more. It just made it too easy on them. Let them hang around in the game. And then when DJ Giddens has the first fumble literally of his career and it's run back for a touchdown. I mean, the guy had over 300 carries without a fumble before that. It's run back for a touchdown. Everybody's a little shell-shocked. Now BYU has the momentum. It's the first time with Avery Johnson playing a road game against a Power 4 team, right? His only road start before that had been at Tulane. So first road start against a Power 4 team. And I was there. It was a rowdy environment. It was loud. It was a very, very good environment that BYU had there. So I think everything just started to snowball, and you saw that definitely in the 2 interceptions that Avery threw. The punt return, I don't know. You just kind of throw your arms up like, what are you going to do? I mean, that could have been
that was wild.
It could have been a touchdown the other way for K-State, the way that was going. And guys get out of their rush lanes when they're tracking the ball. So if you want to say something about it was fluky, that was probably the flukiest thing. Credit the kid from BYU. He made a hell of a play, but, that's
There's
the
no
perfect.
doubt he was gassed, right? Typically, whenever you're throwing up on the bench, it either means you did something really, really good or your body's really, really disagreeing with you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, he had to run a long way for that one. So I get it. Anyway, that was kind of the encapsulation of like how the game was going for K-State at that point. So I don't think K-State is as bad as they showed in that game, but it also now stands to reason that they probably aren't as good as they looked the week before against Arizona. And the reality is somewhere in between. So now it's like, hey, how do you regroup? I think a lot of the questions with the team right now are really on the offensive side of the ball. I think the defense, for the most part, has been fine. BYU had a ton of short fields. They had 3 touchdown drives that were under 40 yards long just because they were getting the ball off of turnovers in field position. So right now it's, hey, Avery Johnson, looks like things are moving really fast for him. How much can you get out of him? How much can they simplify things? How much can you move the offense forward? Because they just have not had much of a downfield passing game this year.
That is a very fair analysis, and it's good to hear about BYU. Provo's been on my bucket list since I was a kid, so I'm very excited for that matchup, or at least I was far more excited before the season started because it looked like a fun time, a great place, and a fairly easy win, but it's not an easy win at all. But if we're going to shift gears a little bit, whenever you look towards this Oklahoma State game, whenever you're kind of focusing in on Kansas State, what do you think would be the biggest keys to victory for the Wildcats? What do they need to shut down? What do they need to try to exploit on either side of the ball, in your opinion, to get this W in Manhattan?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for this team right now is that they've got to play from in front. And I know like that sounds like kind of an obvious thing. Everybody wants to do that, right? You never want to trail in a game, but they just don't have the offense right now and the passing attack at this stage of Avery Johnson's career to be slinging it all over the yard if they can't run the ball. They've been able to run the ball really well. I mean, they've run the ball for 200 yards a game this year. Like nobody can really stop that. BYU wasn't really stopping that, but they had to get away from it because the game got so far out of hand. So when you're talking about a backfield of like DJ Giddens, who I think is one of the most underrated running backs in the country, solid, steady, gets it done all the time, really slippery, is always turning like a 2-yard gain into a 5 or 6 yard gain, like that kind of guy. Explosive enough, certainly not like Deuce Vaughn level explosive, but explosive enough. And then you combine him with Dylan Edwards, who is incredibly electric. And like a lot of the conversation around K-State circles has been, we got to get this guy the ball more. I mean, he's averaging over 8 yards a touch, and they just aren't getting him the ball very much right now. So I'd like to see his amount of touches offensively double from about 6 to more like 10 to 15. And I think they're trying. He was on the field more against BYU. They just didn't actually get the ball in his hands. And again, when you have to get away from the run game, that's probably part of the reason for it. But those two guys are really dynamic in the backfield. Heck, they even really like Joe Jackson, their third string running back, who's looked impressive when he's been able to play a little bit this year. And obviously, Avery Johnson had a 100-yard rushing game against Arizona. He's about as fast as they come at quarterback right now. It does seem like a lot of times when he's running the ball, he's trying to get to the sideline. He's trying to avoid taking hits, which I certainly appreciate for the longevity aspect of the season. But I don't think we've even seen like his best running the football yet so far. So with all of that, that's what you want to do. You want to be able to control the game like that. Use the pass when you can. And also, I think just like get Avery Johnson on the run. He's been better like off platform, making plays when he's kind of out searching and scanning. The pocket passing thing is just, it's very, very hit or miss, more miss than hit right now. So I guess there's a part of me that says, hey, they've got to get better at that. I want them to work on that. But a big part of it is they need to do their thing, which is going to be starting with the run game and then working off some play action pass for Avery and let him get out and make some plays. You have to keep in mind too, I mean, K-State's got a first-year offensive coordinator in Connor Riley, who was the offensive line coach before, got elevated when Colin Klein left over the offseason to go to Texas A&M. Yeah. So there is probably some aspect of everybody just trying to get on the same page with that. But that to me is really the key offensively. You know, defensively, obviously you want to stop the run, but I know the perplexing thing in Stillwater has been just like, I mean, everybody's been able to do that right now. I hesitate to just take it for granted. I mean, I still look at Ollie Gordon in that backfield and I know how veteran that offensive line is. it is puzzling that hasn't worked. You want to do that, but to be honest, I mean, when K-State has been hurt this year defensively, it's been giving up huge pass plays and just getting gashed in the secondary, and it's been communication issues. That's I heard Joe Klannerman say it earlier today, K-State's defensive coordinator, at his press conference, that some of the breakdowns against BYU were related to communication. When they played at Tulane a couple of weeks ago, they gave up a ton of huge plays. And it was all, I mean, you could tell, like the receivers were like high school wide open. You're like, that's not a guy getting beat. That's a coverage bust. And it happened multiple times. So they're pretty veteran back there. And you wonder what exactly is going on, but they need to get something figured out. And I've been really high on Oklahoma State's wide receiver core since the offseason. Now, I know Brennan Presley maybe a little bit up in the air, but he's been around forever and is just so consistently productive. Deshaun Stribling obviously is having an awesome year. Rashad Owens, very, very talented. Like, the receiving core of Oklahoma State is what concerns me there, because we've seen these breakdowns for K-State. Keenan Garber, who is a corner that's been around for a while, former wide receiver, transitioned to corner in the Big 12 championship game a couple of years ago and has played really well since then. He was getting picked on a little bit at BYU. And so was, honestly, Marquise Siegel, who is probably the best safety back there, at least on paper. The K-State coaching staff really, really loves him and felt like he was going to be an NFL guy, the latest NFL transfer that they've had, of which they've had many in that secondary. So I'm, it's like, if those guys are getting picked on. Now, Jacob Parrish has been really good on the other side as kind of a lockdown corner. But that's really what I'm going to be watching. Like, how well can they hold things down in the secondary to keep it from getting out of hand? Because I know, I mean, Alan Bowman, just 2 weeks ago, I realized he got benched, but just 2 weeks ago, we saw him throw for 396 and 5 touchdowns. So I know that Oklahoma State can do it.
Yeah, so hear that, Alan Bowman and Kasey Dunn? This is the game to go Talladega Night style, 4 wide, and just let it fly, right? If everybody knows Alan Bowman has a slight propensity to throw the ball to the other team, just embrace the suck, as they say in the Army, and just let it go, man. Let it fly, let it loose. I, too, am concerned about the 6.2 yards per carry from DJ Giddens, 7.1 yards per carry from Avery Johnson, and 7.4 yards per carry from Dylan Edwards. That is a problem. That is concerning. So I'm glad you were able to kind of accentuate some of that. We're also going to accentuate some of the top players that aren't necessarily the everyday names. Everybody knows Avery Johnson by now. If you're a Big 12 college football fan, everybody should know who Ollie Gordon is, not only because last year he had the Doak Walker Award, 1,700 yards, but because he's also an excellent driver no matter what's happening. But before we do that, we do have to shift gears real quick, and I have to remind folks out here that every now and again, you got to try to take the high society life. And Robinhood can do that for you. Whenever you're looking at getting something in life and you're trying to find a way to take care of your future, find the best way with security with Robinhood. You don't need a silver spoon to eat up financial favors of the same 1% that we all envy. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5 on uninvested cash. Receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at RobinhoodGold.com today. Again, that is RobinhoodGold.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, make sure you visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Get the high society life you deserve today. All right, buddy. Now we get to kind of shift back to this conversation. And everybody knows, for the most part, who's who for both squads. So let's kind of uncover it a little bit and talk about some of the guys that maybe not everybody is aware of. If you're in Austin Romaine, of course, we need to pay attention to that. From an Oklahoma State perspective, I think a few names that aren't, everyday run-of-the-mill. It's going to be a true freshman, Lando Cleveland. The way we had to rotate at Utah, against Utah, is forcing us to play a little bit more depth at safety. So I think the freshman, number 14, somebody to watch out for. Defensive line. One of these days, Colin Clay is going to absolutely dominate the A-gap all day. It's got to be the K-State game for me. And then for my third choice, if we're going to be talking about the cornerbacks and protecting the wide receiver core that is really good at Kansas State, so if Avery Johnson does have the ability to let it fly, to me, it's got to come down to either Corey Black or Cam Smith. And I just haven't been sold this year on Corey Black, so I'm going to go with Cam Smith. What do you say, sir, about some of the Wildcats that we may not know as every day, but we absolutely need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind, because he's having a great season, is Brendan Mott, who is a defensive end. And, if you're looking down like the game notes right now, you're probably going to see a lot about him because he's been one of the most productive pass rushers in the league so far. But he was far from a household name coming into the season. And K-State, I think for a while, thought he was just going to move on last year and be done, but he decided to come back. He is a former walk-on. He's kind of the typical K-State story, not a heralded guy. He's pretty small, honestly, when you look at him. He's lanky. He's all arms and legs. He's not somebody you'd look at and think, wow, like that's Felix Anudike-Uzomah, right, from a couple of years ago.
Right.
He's different, but he is so crafty and is just an effort guy. Like, I'm a big Chiefs fan. Honestly, he gets a lot of like the effort sacks, kind of like George Karlaftis does on the Chiefs defensive line for anybody that's watching them on a regular basis. But he has been very important this year. Another guy, honestly, on the defensive line is a former Manhattan High Indian, who is, again, a guy that was not real heralded, not highly recruited. But I saw him play a lot of high school football.
TV timeout. Come again? One more again?
Manhattan High. Played at Manhattan High. Damian Ilalio, who's been very good on the defensive line, defensive tackle. He's kind of taken over the number one spot from Uso Seumalo, who was thought to be the starter this year. And I think those guys on the interior have actually done a really good job this year. And that was a real position of concern going into the season. So they've done a nice job of shoring things up. I would point out on offense, too, somebody that K-State desperately wants to get going. And this is K-State fans will probably roll their eyes a little bit because we did it all of last year. Wanted to see this guy get going. Wanted to see him get going. He was battling injuries last year. But it's Keegan Johnson at wide receiver. He former Iowa Hawkeye. He was almost the Big Ten freshman of the year. His first year, he had a lot of explosive plays. Injuries have always kind of plagued him throughout his career, and that's been something that has been an issue, but seemingly healthy this year. And they've tried to really force feed him the ball. They did it early in the game against BYU and got him going a bit, but it just has never caught on to be explosive playmaker down the field. It's been more short stuff, but that is somebody to watch out for. If the passing game really is going to unlock the way that K-State wants it to, I think Keegan Johnson is going to have to be a really big part of that.
Yeah, I think we need to pay attention to Jace Brown, but I did want to ask, I thought Dante Cephas was a massive grab for K-State in the offseason. Has he kind of been somewhat underwhelming? Has there been some kind of issues getting him open, or what's the case with Mr. Dante Cephas?
Yeah, to be honest, it has been a bit underwhelming. It's felt like with him, it's just like him and Avery have not been on the same page. He's been targeted quite a bit, actually, but it's not resulted in many catches. And, they tried a deep shot to him, for instance, down the field early in the BYU game. It did appear like it was there. The throw was a little bit off, and it may just be, Avery's had a tendency to overthrow deep balls. It may just be that. But I always wonder with that, I'm like, I'd love to be able to go back and watch like an all 22 if he maybe slowed down a bit, or if they're just not on the same page in terms of like his speed, where he's going to be at on certain routes, because there have just been a bunch of those throughout the year that have been off. So yeah, it has not totally come together. It's pretty clear the best connection that Avery Johnson has with a receiver is definitely Jace Brown. And those guys, I believe, live together. So, and they were true freshmen last year. Like, they're in the same class. They definitely like know each other. That's the guy that he's connecting with most frequently there. And I would mention too, like tight ends, Garrett Oakley was a big name coming into the year.
I was about to say, you guys in Iowa State always have an NFL tight end, so give us the sneak peek on that dude.
Well, yeah. So the surprising thing is that Garrett Oakley was the name everybody was very high on, and there was chatter when Ben Sinnott was there, who obviously was a second-round draft pick. There was chatter that Garrett Oakley was a guy who maybe at least as a pure pass catcher had a higher ceiling just from an athleticism standpoint. He's not as big.
Ooh.
He's not built the same way. And so I think, overall tight end, maybe you didn't think he'd be able to knock out, like, there was a great touchdown run last year where Ben Sinnott took out two guys in one play. You weren't expecting that from him, but you were expecting a lot in the passing game, and he's been pretty quiet, to be honest, this year. But Braden Lofton is the guy that stepped up. He was less heralded, not somebody that generated as much interest, but he had a couple touchdown catches, and he had turned into the guy that was the reliable go-to tight end. Well, he got hurt early in the BYU game in the first half. Went out with a knee injury. It sounds like he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Chris Kleiman said this week it's not going to be season-ending. But he was out, and then Garrett Oakley got dinged up in the first half of the BYU game. So part of the problem, I think, in the red zone was that they were down to their third and fourth string tight ends. And so it was hurting in the run game, but also they have not thrown a touchdown pass to a receiver yet this year. It's been all tight ends and backs. And so that takes away a big piece of the red zone playbook that you had there. So they got Garrett Oakley back eventually later in the game. But I think you're going to need to see more from him, more production from him if Braden Lofton's going to be out for a little while, because that's the guy that they've really been leaning on. So tight end position in a little bit of flux right now.
Bro, you have a quarterback that runs a 4.4 40. We have no sympathy for you in the red zone, right? I'm just going to throw that out there, all right? Before we shift to the expectations, predictions, and picks real quick, tell me if I'm crazy, because I've been called crazy before, just like I've been wrong once before back in 97. But is Chris Kleiman not just kind of picked up the torch from Bill Snyder and kind of maintained the same philosophy, the same level of expectations, better recruiting, and the same mantra, like defensively and on the O-line, D-line, y'all look almost the same as you always have. Like, that's just insane how Kleiman has almost replicated the Bill Snyder. Like, K-State, you haven't experienced a drop-off since Ron Prince. That's almost not even fair.
I mean, it is incredibly impressive, and I think that observation is pretty spot on. But the interesting thing is, like, well, a lot of the core tenets of the program haven't changed, right? I mean, it's going to be a pretty physical team. It's not going to be about finesse. It's going to be about run the football, be good in the trenches, turn you over, take it. Like, that's Chris Kleiman era. They've been really good at turnover margin. That's been a huge, huge thing for them. A lot of the same hallmarks of like a Bill Snyder team. They are now starting to recruit better the last 2 or 3 years, and you're seeing that really come up. In fact, the roster's really set up for next year to be the year where you would feel like they would really explode. Of course, if you can keep everybody, which is more up in the air these days than it ever used to be. But aside from those core tenets, the way you get there is much different, because Chris Kleiman is very much laid back, players coach, let the players do their thing, let them show personality. He's going to love you up. Whereas Bill Snyder was complete opposite approach, where it's, everybody's real tight, real buttoned up. He's walking around with a recorder at every single practice, talking into the recorder when you screw something up so he can go back and listen to it later and make sure it gets corrected. Completely different styles as far as that goes. But also, in terms of a lot of their like values and what they're all about, it is pretty darn similar. It definitely fits the culture. And now that's the exciting part for K-State fans, is that you're starting to add more high-level talent on there, like an Avery Johnson, who, speaking of Ron Prince, the highest-rated quarterback recruit K-State's had since Josh Freeman, like a Dylan Edwards, who they were able to keep back home, and even some of those transfers that I mentioned, like Jace Brown, Notre Dame wanted him, Texas A&M wanted him. So they've been able to dip their toe into a deeper recruiting water for sure with Kleiman.
Yeah, the fact that Avery goes back with his buddy Dylan Edwards, that he was able to kind of convince to come back home, that in and of itself is a really cool story. Hopefully everybody out here has the opportunity to really cool story financially with the bee's knees and the dollar bills department. You already know it is FanDuel time, because if you're looking to hit the over, it doesn't really matter which way you look at it, whether you're going to hit the over on DJ Giddens or you're going to hit the over on Ollie Gordon. There's a game where my dude busts loose. Get with FanDuel today, because right now you have the ability to get a big return from America's #1 sports book. When you get the warm, tingly, and fuzzy feeling in the middle of the game that something amazing is about to happen, you can now check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you're placing your bets from. You'll get started today with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's a $5 holler for the opportunity to get $200 back in bonus bets. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com today. Here on the Hammer the Over Club, this is the day Ollie Gordon gets free, right? It's got to be. I can feel it in my computer screen. I can feel it in my loins. All righty, John. Now we get to shift gears one more time here. When it comes to the expectations for Wildcat Country this Saturday against the Cowboys, I will tell you, with the offensive coordinator limitations that we have, I'm very trepidatious about picking us to win this game. Therefore, I've been pretty reluctant to do so. So I don't know that my expectations are crazy high. I do expect it to be a very close game, because they always typically are. What are your expectations for the Purple Power Cats versus the Cowboys, brother man?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of trepidation among K-State fans as well after what we saw last week. And I do think it will be a good game. And this series, I mean, look, Chris Kleiman's only beat Mike Gundy one time. Now, the one time he did it, I mean, he got his money's worth doing it 2 years ago. but yes, I mean, God, all those trips to Stillwater. I've been to Stillwater so many times to watch K-State lose. Thankfully, K-State's at home. And I do think a lot of what you're seeing with this team is that they are such a young team. You're going to get a lot of variance between home and road. Okay. It's probably going to be tougher for them to keep it together on the road when things start to go wrong and snowball. And at home, it can be a different animal. You know what I mean? They had just a wretched into the first half against Arizona, for instance, which is a lot of adversity to go through there. Embarrassing into the half, quite frankly. But they were at home, crowds behind them, felt much more comfortable. They came out in the second half and they just pummeled Arizona. So I think there's something to that. Yeah. If you believe in trends, like, they've been great under Chris Kleiman coming off of a loss. They've won 9 straight coming off of a loss by an average of 24 points a game. And one of those games was that Oklahoma State game 2 years ago. They had lost at TCU, tough game, heartbreaker. They came back and played probably their best game of the year that year. So I think a lot of those things make me feel better about it. Even as I kind of telegraphed the season, I took some crap on our Fremont podcast for picking BYU to beat K-State at the beginning of the year, but I was looking at it like, situationally, that was kind of you're coming off a big game, you're looking ahead to a big game. It's this sandwich spot. It's a team that probably doesn't excite them with the name quite as much, and it's going to be a really tough environment. You're going to play in altitude. All these things situationally seem to be working against them in that game. So it really didn't surprise me very much that they lost last week. I think you're going to get a good performance out of them. This is one of those where, like, if I'm wrong and you don't and they lose, I think they are going to be in some big trouble this year. But my expectation right now is that you will get a sharper performance out of K-State, kind of following those trends. So I'm seeing it like, 31-24 K-State, something like that. I think the key, though, will be that you can't fall behind. They've got to play from in front. If they can, like they did against Arizona, I think they should be okay. But I do expect a tough competitive game.
Well, respectfully, just like we have this non-rivalry, it's a thing, man. We love K-State. K-State loves us. Manhattan's a lot like Stillwater. The community is about the same. It's just, there's so much similarities. I almost hate that we love each other as a fan base and always will. It's kind of a cool thing to some degree. So I am going to say 34-31 Purple Power Cats. Why? Because it feels like these games are always 34-31 or 35-32. It just feels right. Like it requires no research to come up with that number. All right. Lastly, before I let you skedaddle on off of here, tell me where you think I'm crazy here. I've got BYU over Baylor. I don't think there'll be an argument on that one. TCU KU, man, that's almost like a pillow fight of obscurity in and of itself. But I think I'm going Rock Chalk Jayhawk has to get off the snide at some point in time. So give me the Jayhawks. I think UCF is going to trounce Colorado. Give me Iowa State over Houston, of course. Cincinnati, I think they can get it done, except for it's at Texas Tech, and it's a night game. So I guess I'll go Taco Recum Tech, followed by Utah over Arizona. What do you say, sir?
Yeah, Utah, Arizona, it's like I want to believe in Arizona. I love some of the high-end talent on their roster. They are coming off of a bye week, and they really smoked Utah last year. And there was some bad blood, too, at the end of that game. They scored a touchdown when they could have just been kneeling the ball down. But I don't feel very good about that. I think Utah is just going to smother them, whether or not Cam Rising plays. KU, TCU, I've been on Kansas like 3 straight weeks thinking like they've got to play better, right? I mean, there's so much talent there that I don't understand how it's not clicking and how they're not doing that. And TCU was just, watch that SMU game last week, just an abject disaster. They turned it over 5 times. They gave up 3 non-offensive touchdowns. Their coach is getting thrown out of the game. Like, I think Kansas will win in front of a very sparse crowd. Things are not looking great for the attendance.
I know, dude.
But I think it's going to be a sparse crowd. I think I'll pick Kansas, but I just give the caveat that I've been dead wrong on them all season long because of that. Baylor BYU is interesting. Baylor is a favorite actually there at home. And I think a lot of that is based on like the situation where BYU's coming off of a huge win. And now you've got to go on the road. But like, where's Baylor's heads at after what happened last week? I would go BYU close, but I do expect a pretty good game there. Colorado, UCF. UCF's pass defense, I was looking through some things like their pass defense success rate is like 92nd in the country. So I do wonder if we could get a shootout there if Colorado could actually protect Shedeur a little bit. I think we could get a really high-scoring, fun game.
John, I have something for you there. All right.
Okay.
My comp for UCF this season is 2012 K-State.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Well, they got the massive jumbo quarterback that just wants to run it and some great.
Colin Klein could yell over the huddle and tell everybody what y'all were going to run, and he was still going to get 2 or 3 yards no matter what. That's KJ Jefferson and RJ Harvey and their wide receiver jet sweep game that they have, man. It reminds me a lot of 2012 K-State, and it's maddening. Now, we somehow pulled that W out in 2012 against K-State, but that was, dude, it was just frustrating to watch that team. It's like, we can't stop them. It's 4th and 1. Like, we can't. What are we doing? That's UCF. You haven't called me crazy yet.
I like that, man. That's pretty good because that is, Gus, if they could run the ball every single snap, they would do it. Like they don't. Now, I said like Kobe Hudson's a good receiver and he, made some great plays, especially down the stretch at TCU a couple of weeks ago. I do think UCF is going to win that game by a couple of scores. But I think it could be really fun. I think it could be another one that draws a pretty big TV number for all the obvious reasons with Colorado, but also just because it could be a really fun game with a lot of big plays with Harvey running everywhere and Colorado busting some big ones to Travis Hunter and, that entire receiver core. Like they've got a lot of really talented receivers there at Colorado. So I'll take UCF there. Cincinnati, Texas Tech. I really am intrigued by that because I feel like both of those teams, Tech's trying to like reassert itself as like, hey, we're here. We've got it figured out. Taj Brooks is back. We're okay. Meanwhile, Cincinnati's just trying to prove that they're legit. They've already won as many games as they did last year, but this would be the kind of game that shows like, all right, like, yeah, this is not just, hey, product of the schedule early. We're a team that can really hang here. I would take Tech close, but I think that will be, I think Cincinnati's better than people think. So I think you will get a pretty close game out of those. And
if it was morning or afternoon, I might have likely picked Cincinnati.
Yeah, like if that's like an 11 a.m. game in Lubbock.
But I know you've been to Lubbock at night, and it is. Oh, I've been one time, and I thought I was about it, but I left there like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, it's a very good atmosphere there in Lubbock for sure, man. So what was the line? I heard a great line in the play-by-play guy in the Tech Arizona State. He was like, it was 2 tortillas short of a first down or something. I'll say Cincinnati comes up like 3 tortillas short in Lubbock. And then, Iowa State, Houston, I imagine Iowa State rolls. I mean, they look really good right now, and they've got an incredibly manageable schedule. So, look, I've seen Matt Campbell lose 6 games with a roster full of now NFL Pro Bowlers. So, I mean, they could lose, but I'm going to say Iowa State will win pretty comfortably against Houston there. And I think I got everything. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
You got it. You nailed it. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy dude and you got other things to go. At least what I say is I got stuff to go pretend to do today. You have real stuff to do. I got pretend stuff to do. John, it was an absolute pleasure, brother, man. Thank you very, very much for your time. And let the fine folks out here know, if they don't already know, now you know, players, how do they reach out to John Kurtz and see what you have rocking and rolling?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So biggest thing I'm pushing right now, I've got a Big 12 newsletter. We've got 2,300 plus Big 12 fans that are reading this right now. It's called Open for Business, like our guy Brett Yormark likes to say. So to sign up, you can just go to ofbnews.com, ofbnews.com. I filter college football news through to you to the Big 12, what matters to the Big 12, getting the Big 10 and the SEC stuff out of there because it's really hard to not read college football news through a Big 10 or SEC lens. So ofbnews.com if you want that. Follow me on YouTube. Live shows Wednesdays and Sundays. Very Big 12 heavy there. It's just John Kurtz, JohnKurtz, my name, to find me on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz if you want to do that as well. And if you are a K-State fan, which I know we have a huge K-State audience watching the Locked On Oklahoma State channel here, but it's the 3 Mod podcast, wherever you find podcasts, if you want some K-State specific content there.
Awesome, John. Again, man, appreciate what you do. Have a good time, not too good of a time in Manhattan, in Kansas this weekend. Thank you very much. And definitely look forward to having you on again, brother, man.
Absolutely. Anytime, Cody. Thanks, man.
All righty, boss. No problem. All righty, y'all. I reckon that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere, so happy you choose to be here. Like it if you liked it, I gonna think. Dislike if you don't, that's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast and people out there, you're the bricks, the bread, the butter, the fondue, the fountain. You know what it is. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. All righty, y'all. Later, my taters.